DJ. No, jokes, I'm not a DJ. That's all G's. All right, so first of all, we'd like to kick it off right by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and pay respects to elders past, present, and future. Massive shout out. This is obviously not a one-man show. We got Open Source in the building. Ricky, love you, mate. Eski, love you. Jeff, he's not really open source, but he's just a legend kicking back this stat, you know, helping us out with the graphics. Split Atoms on the beat. Man, you know, I kick it off with it's dope as fuck to be sober. That's my slogan. So if you have issues with drinking, just, stop that. If you need some help, reach out to me. I'll help you. Yeah, my man, my lady. And then, go like the Godzilla podcast page. I sort of fucked up. I made it a group, and you actually need a page these days. I'm just letting you know. Yeah, FYI. And also, as you probably would have seen with the promo, massive shout out to 4E Sydney. This is the last week of the festival. Make sure you click the 4E Sydney page. Big shout out to Viv. And, we were able to bring one of the guests that was on my list of guests to bring in. The man, the myth, the legend, Mistery in the building. How you doing?
I am excellent.
Yeah.
Mr. Munro. Excellent. Yeah.
So for those that see the uncanny resemblance, yes, we are related.
Yes.
Yeah. By hip hop, right?
Yes.
Yeah, not actually physically related,
and geographically, sort of.
Geographically, 100% geographically. Yeah. No, well, no doubt. That sort of goes into the first part, and man, you and I always talk crap about this all the time, but I like to ask the guests always so people get a bit of context. Mate, where'd you grow up?
In the magical land of Sefton, actually, yeah. And there's something in the water there that makes slender white men with beards that wear grey marl and black pants, apparently. So, your mum rang me and she said, you're wearing that today. So
you got the memo.
Yeah. Born in Bankstown, and normally I would say don't judge me, but you will not judge me. That's good. And raised in Sefton. And
what street? Tell me your street.
Rod Street.
What?
Rod Street.
Rod Street.
So just off Hector Street.
100% it's just off Hector.
So I went to Sefton Public School across the road, and Burong, and Sefton High back in the days.
I used to live in Roosevelt Street.
Oh, right. Yeah. There you go.
How about that? The funny thing is, because we always talk Bankstown, but you only say Bankstown because nobody really knows where Sefton is.
No one wants to know. Yeah.
But if they do know where Sefton is, it's for one geographical location in Sefton.
Yes, I know what you're going to say.
The unmentionable.
Yeah.
But, everyone's
We all had to earn a bit of money back in the days, you know what I mean?
And it wasn't the roller skating ring, let me tell you about that. Crocker's Paints. Absolutely.
Exactly.
That's what we're talking about.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah. Man, it's crazy as well, growing up and being in that area. And I always talk about on the podcast, we're not traditionally, I don't know if you know this, we're not traditionally a hip-hop country. Okay?
Yes.
And so it's always interesting to me to find out, what people's first experience was, with hip hop.
Yeah. So I was thinking about it because I've been hearing other people.
So you watch the podcast?
I listen to it.
I
listen to it.
Man.
Because some of the guys are quite ugly, and I'm offended. Shout out to El Fresh, Nino Brown. Nah, my homie's just joking. I was thinking about it, and the first time I actually heard anything related to hip hop was at school at Sefton High, and it was in roll call, and we were talking about there'd been a music video on the night before, and it was Buffalo Girls by Malcolm McLaren, which had breaking in it. It had sort of like some pseudo sort of rapping in it, and graph and all that sort of stuff. And we were like, what the hell was that? People spitting on their backs and stuff. And the movie Breakin' came out, or Breakdance in Australia.
Yeah.
And Hey You, the Rocksteady Crew. And so all of us saw breaking first. We didn't know that it was like part of a culture. We just thought if you were a breakdancer, or back in the days, I'm going to say it, a rap dancer, that was the term. Molly Meldrum, you've destroyed our street cred.
Rap dancing?
Yeah, that if you were breaking, you also did graffiti. You also rapped. You know, it was early days with DJing. We were kids. We couldn't afford that sort of equipment. But, you know, recording off the radio with your tape. Yeah, if you had a tape-to-tape ghetto blast, that was like the best thing ever. And so, like, people experimented with bodgy equipment. And then ultimately, some of those guys ended up being DJs or producers or whatever, you know. So, yeah.
100%. And I mean, you know, I'd get intrigued, you know, particularly about the, you know, those early days because, you know, me coming up, I was, you know, obviously in the 90s, there was sort of more established, you know, hip hop really had branched out. It wasn't just New York anymore. It was over in LA. You know, it started to trickle down south, and those influences started going across. But in terms of the scene, pardon me, the Pepsi's already kicking in. But in terms of the scene, were there, outside of the school, were you already teeing up with, you know, other breakers, or, you know, were you, you know, battling crews and stuff like that? Were you throwing down?
Yeah, I mean, when breaking first came to Australia, it was a fad. You know, it was like...
Don't you love that word with regards to hip-hop? Fad.
Yeah, JJ fad. So it was like, you know, kids are in the hula hoops or yo-yos, breaking. And so, like, every school had 3 or 4 breaking crews. And so you'd be battling at lunchtime in the hallways, things like that, you know. And any of the old school dudes, you know, listening to this will say, yeah, man, I remember doing that. And if you went to another suburb, if you were dressed like a breaker, people would call you out for battles, you know. I remember, you know...
Wait,
yeah.
really?
Yeah.
That's like in the movies.
Yeah. I remember going to Bankstown Square... Right, and we had
City
our
limits.
Yeah. Oh, this is before that, man. And we had our like Japanese kamikaze headbands on, and you know, like hoodies, and carrying a ghetto blaster. And as we were crossing the road, a bunch of other dudes were like, "Hey, you guys breakers, let's battle." And so you would literally battle like there and then, you know. But that didn't last. That sort of started to peter out. And then
I was gonna say, fuck, but bro, that's so hectic. That's like battling Pokemon and stuff. Like,
yeah, but it was actually real battles, which was dope. You know, like people bought it.
Yeah, like you were getting
was
like
it
not.
was
I don't
angsty.
wanna, yeah, I was gonna say like it got heated. Like you weren't about to fucking, well, you know, not to sound cliche, but you weren't going out like that.
No, that's it. You know, even when I went to interstate with my brother, we met this other b-boy at a caravan park, a hotel sort of thing, and he was like, let's battle, and we're like, oh, all right, no worries, you know. And so that was like the norm. But you know, and there were some crews that sort of made it bigger, you know, Autocrats and UBTs and those guys, and Dynamic Floor Masters were in Bankstown, and Street Jammers. There was a whole bunch of them that were in like music videos or were judging the comps, and my first ever competition was at Basil Plaza, right? I went in it with my homie, and he could do a backspin, an American backspin, which is like quite hard at that time.
Yeah.
And all I could pretty much do was the moonwalk, and Street Jammers were the judge, and so we went.
Honest, it's still the moonwalk.
It's the moonwalk, right? And so our routine consisted of us both going out like popping,
yeah, and
then me moonwalking away. And him doing a backspin. And so our set lasted all of 30 seconds, you know what I mean? Needless to say, we didn't win. And Basil Plaza, I still have post-traumatic stress when I drive past of the shame. If any shopkeeper in there remembers me, I cannot show my face in that place, you know? But, yeah, so...
I could picture it.
Yeah, that was it.
That was it.
That was my extent. I think I did an arm wave or something as well, you know. And we all had our sort of like happy shoes on and our new romantics hairstyles, you know. But
when was this? Like this is 80s.
Yeah, so that was like early 80s. So maybe 83, 84. That's when Beat Street came out in 84. But we were already breaking, you know, when that came out.
Yeah.
And
You already had, you know.
Yeah, we would go to the cinema to watch Beat Street, and I remember going to Fairfield Cinema.
Yeah.
And pretty much the whole cinema was full of breakers. And as soon as the movie finished, everyone would go out into the foyer and just start battling. Because everyone was just like pumped, you know, because of like that last scene in Beat Street, you know.
Yeah, of course.
And it was cool days, man, and it was quite innocent, like, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's sort of good because it sort of stood for the reason why all that stuff, you know, why it all started, right? Was like, you know, like crews, rather than getting violent and rather than, you know, they were thrown down, you know what I mean? Like it didn't have to result in a, you know, Bankstown punch on or a stabbing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's the thing, like, you know, growing up in Bankstown, it's always been a multicultural area.
Yep.
Sefton High, when I was there, it was pretty much thirds. It was third Southeast Asian, third Middle Eastern, and third Anglo. But when breaking and that hit, everyone was, interacting, and the crews were made up of everyone. And so hip-hop really did sort of break down a lot of the barriers, you know?
Yeah, it's so sick, man. And, you know, it would have been such a dope time, you know, to be out, because obviously then it started to move away, you know, from the breaking, and the breaking was really sort of like had it sort of. Although that being said, and this is probably like something like I want to, you know, talk to you about, is, you know, who were your first, like, I want to say reputable or big crew associations, you know, like if, you know, transitioning, I suppose, or starting with the breaking, who were, you know, because I suppose I want to go into the graph and stuff later, but seeing as the breaking really what kick-started it, who were your biggest like associations? Who were the guys that were maybe getting you on stages or teaching you the real ropes?
So breaking wise, as you can probably tell from my Basil Plaza experience, I was not the best breaker in our crew. Shocked.
Hype man.
You may be, I know. But in Beach Street, there was Ramo, there was Kenny, there was like the rapper, the DJ, the graffiti writer, and so I was the graffiti writer. You know, I was the dude in the crew that like dresses the best, but it looks like he can do amazing moves, but cannot. But I started to focus more on graffiti.
Yep.
As far as like. I knew the older guys. I mean, when you're a kid, like 3 years difference is massive, and so
that's right,
I was 13 or 14, and the guys in autocrats or UBTs or whatever, they would have been 16 or 17, you know, and so they were like much older at that time.
Yeah,
you know? Now we're homies. We're all sort of like same age bracket,
100%.
But yeah, so they were the guys that we looked up to. I was never in like an amazing b-boy crew, but what happened was when it started to peter out, most people either gave up totally or they got into graph.
Yep.
Most.
Yep.
A few got into rapping and stuff like that as well. I was in a crew which was one of the, as far as I know, the only full-on b-boy crew in Sydney in the sort of late 80s.
Yep.
And there's a few cool stories, but we went to this Def Jam. So the Def Jam's like what Russ puts on. That was from back then.
Holy shit.
And it was at Paddington Town Hall.
Yep.
And we went there with our crew, and just to break, just for fun, because there's no one to battle.
Yep.
And anyway, some of their original crew were there from Electric Boogaloos, I think they were called.
Yeah.
Anyway, half those guys said, "Oh, we're going to go with our old crew, and we're going to battle you guys." And we were like, "Oh, damn." And we'd seen, there'd been a b-boy battle, sort of like a competition type of thing at the Bondi Pavilion at Def Jam maybe 6 months earlier.
Yep.
And there were these two dudes there that were pretty good. And I'd seen them in the audience. And so I just went up to them with my other friend, Tito, and we were like, "Hey, man, can you join with us? Because we're about to battle this other crew." And they were like, "Yeah, cool, man." Anyway, we battled our former friends and the Boogaloos guys. And then they brought out some poppers, and we were like, "Hey man, who pops here?" And so me and this other guy went out, and we battled popping, and that dude is Sarek from Death Wish Cast.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah. And so then after that, we became mates.
Yep.
And started doing music, and our crew called Superstars was all elements crew. So we had writers, DJs, MCs, all that sort of stuff. You know, my homie Outlaw was in it, who was like one of my mates from Sefton High back in the days, and so we kept on doing all elements, and so we were sort of like I said, all elements of the culture, but we were really trying to push it and like do production graph stuff, not just like little pieces here and there. You know, and started to do a bit of music and all that sort of stuff. But there were crews that were doing music in more of like a club sense and more professional than us at that time. Would have been Westside Posse back then, which became, Renegade Funk Train. Oh, sorry, Sound Unlimited, then Renegade Funk Train. So those guys, and one of the guys from that crew association, so Rosano and those guys from Sound Unlimited, his Graph crew, Fab 4, one of the guys in that crew, I met him and he taught me about Graph. So he was the first dude to do a piece in Sydney.
Yeah.
Back in the days at the Domain.
Yeah.
And rest in peace, Cass, Dem too. And so, so I sort of met those guys and I was like mad fanboy. And I still am. I'm still like mad fanboy of Styles and Rosano and Vlad and those guys. And so then Superstars sort of started to get a little bit of a name.
Yep.
And and then ultimately we went separate ways and formed Death Wish Cast and formed Brethren.
Yeah. Which, sort of, I sort of started to get, in the 90s, we started to see that coming up and stuff like that as well. But just circling back to the graph, that's obviously like your strong point, and Cass, them too, like how pivotal was that in terms of like getting that influence as well? And because, dude, like, straight up, if people don't know, who you are, but particularly, you've got a very, you can see your style from like a mile away, in terms of particularly your characters and stuff like that. How much was an impact, was that influence? And, because I also remember, funnily enough, I think you posted a video of you on like even a... It's like in a current affair or something. Fucking terrible. What? Look, it is terrible.
I'm talking really softly with a high voice. I was must have been listening to a lot of Michael Jackson at the time. I was staying in Neverland Ranch at the time. No, sorry.
Anyway, but how big was that? Because it's obviously led to you having such a distinct style. As a graph artist. And provided so much opportunity for you. Yeah,
so I mean, I was already drawing as a kid. Yep. I was always a comic fan and drawing Mad Magazine stuff, and
Did you
Mickey
end up
Mouse.
doing stuff?
I worked for Mad Magazine as well.
What the hell?
Yeah. I did about 5 or 6 issues for Mad Magazine and did a cover and stuff like that. So that for me was like a dream come true.
100%.
Yeah. So that was cool. And I did some jobs like subcontract jobs for Disney, like murals and stuff like that. So I worked for a lot of the people that I looked up to. So, I've sort of ticked the bucket list for people that inspired me. But the thing with Cass was his mum was friends with this lady that my mum worked with. And she was like, oh, there's this guy staying down the road. He's minding a house. Can you go say hello? And then I was like, man, I freaking love that dude's graph. And he sat down, he explained a little bit about lettering, drew me a sketch, and we just kicked it and stuff. And the thing that was interesting about that was at that time, a lot of people kept hip hop a secret and they tried to push down the next generation because it was like very competitive. But he was like of the mindset, well, if I don't teach you and sort of instill, that mentorship type of model, really the culture's going to die. And so that is why I still do workshops, because of that night, that conversation, because I was like, I'd rather be like this dude than the other dudes that are pushing guys down, and I think that's paid off over the years,
Straight up, man. And I mean, that sort of goes into, a question I got for it later. But the other thing is for graph, even on the come up for me, TPC. I remember Bonds doing a whole bunch of stuff as well. There was, I don't know, do you know a guy, Ticker?
Yeah.
So Ticker used to live in my street.
Right.
And they used to just sort of run together, and I just remember it being so territorial, man. And the graph guys were really pretty heavy, and even Hal sort of mentioned it when he came through. You know what I mean? It was pretty heavy, and I do remember it, man. It was. You sort of didn't want to be too much involved with the graph guys and go out and paint with them just in case you got into some shit. So knowing you and like obviously your nature and even just the conversation or just what you said, how was that competitiveness and territorial aspect of the graph scene for you coming up?
Yeah, I mean it sorts people out, and even though I'm quite encouraging, I had to go through that baptism of fire myself. I've been there, done that,
Crazy.
Like I wasn't always a nice guy, I've always been sort of like caring, but there were times where push came to shove, man. I've always been a martial arts head, I've been training martial arts longer than I've been doing hip hop, and so if stuff went down, I had to represent,
had to represent
from, from time to
the
time.
36 chambers, you know.
Yeah, and so you know, that's part of it. You know, like I was explaining to someone once. I said the different elements of hip hop, you know, especially back then, attract different types of people. You know, and I would say the MCs are the dudes that are like, I'm deep, man, and I got something to say.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of a bit tough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
just a bit though.
Yeah, yeah. And the DJs are like, you know, I'm funky, but I'm a bit nerdy because I can actually save up the money to actually buy this equipment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the B-boys and B-girls are like, we just have fun, and you know, we just like muck around and lots of stuff. Yeah, but the writers are the ones that are actually tough. You know, like generally, and you know, in another interview, they were asking me about the whole thing of street art and graph.
Yeah.
And I said, listen, if I had a street artist looking for me, I wouldn't really lose any sleep over it. But if there was a graph writer, I'd be like, hey man, I'm watching my back. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah.
You got your head on swivel, like,
yeah.
Shit, he's gonna come up behind me, just does.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, that said, you know, like I'm still in contact with dudes that are, you know, in that world and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, everyone's got their own motives and all that sort of stuff. And at the end of the day, it's about, you know, you might have a different lifestyle to other people, but if your art's dope, then I'll give you props, man, you know?
Yeah,
so,
straight up. But it's funny you say that as well, because I think that's an element of the graph scene that doesn't really leave. Like, you still know that the guys that are heads, that they're still heads. You know? There's still that core, like, you know, you used the word angst before, you know what I mean? Like there's still, it's still competitive. It's still like who got what up where, who's capping who this, whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But I think one thing that's important, and, you know, I'm still involved in the breaking scene. I'm like hosting events now and stuff like that. You know, it's like when they put sports people out to pasture and they're on the field, like interviewing the guys after the analyst game. Yeah. I'm that dude.
That was a great moonwalker. I know, because I'm a moonwalk professional.
Like Roy and HG of like breaking. But I love it when the battles get heated, and I'm like, man, when it's like almost a fight, it's dope, because people actually push themselves, you know what I mean? And at the end of the day, it's just a game, you know. It's like freestyle battles, you know. Like, you can say all these things about your mama and all that sort of stuff. It's like, you don't know his mum. Yeah. Well, how can you be an authority to speak on his mother's sexual behavior? You know what I mean? Like,
the way that they talk about it sometimes, I feel like they really do know their mum.
Maybe they do. Maybe I'm on a shallow end of the conversation.
On occasion, they may know their mum.
Yeah.
Looking then to, you know, and it's cool, man, because, you know, you give me a little bit, it's cool to see how Sarek came into the picture and all that sort of stuff, because that's stuff that, and I know that we were speaking a bit off camera about the whole accent thing. I think that was a bit of a segmentation of crews, you know, to a degree, and we'll chat about that later. But then, you know, being someone that's sort of all elements as well, when did the rhyming really kick off, and
so we were doing crap little rhymes when we were breaking. Yeah, when we were breaking, it was just like stupid little rappy rap things, you know, while we were standing around the lino, like straight up. But we weren't really considering writing tracks. But then as it become more prominent, you know, we were like, actually, let's do this when we're not breaking, you know. So
how did it become a prominent element though? Like, you know, because obviously the graph and the breaking, you know, they were, you know, expressive forms that were like sort of accessible. Who made the rhyming accessible? Do you know what I mean? Who had the mics? Who had, you know, was there anyone sort of stand out that was like really doing that?
I think that, you know, I mean, we were just rapping over whatever instrumental we had on the Ghetto Blaster at the time, and you couldn't really get instrumentals, you know. But when there were more tracks that were played on the radio, you know, and it was like, and it wasn't like commercial radio, it was like the 12-inch mix show really late at night, where you would tape it and they'd play like What People Do for Money or some early Run DMC or whatever. And so then we started listening to rap music as opposed to just like breaking stuff, which was like a little bit of rap, a little bit of funk, a little bit of electro. And then we were like, oh no, this is actually a thing. And I remember me and my mate Tito, we went over to North Sydney to meet with Blaze, and Blaze gave us a mixtape.
True.
Yeah, and it had some early stuff on it. And those things are life-changing, you know? Like, we were
100%.
actually listening to rap all the time. And I was at Outlaw's house with Sarek, and we got the vinyl. There was like a Def Jam compilation, and had Orange Juice Jones Walking in the Rain on it, which isn't even rap, but it had Public Enemy on it.
Yeah.
And we were like, what the hell is this? Because it was like real discordant hip hop. It wasn't melodic or funky. It was just like real raw.
Yeah.
And
just like
yeah,
raps,
just spitting,
raps,
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember at the there was a Graffiti Hall of Fame at North Sydney, and there was a piece of the words Run DMC, and I was like, what the hell does that mean? And then we started to hear Run DMC, and so, you know, we were just listening to it more, and so obviously it became more of our expression sort of thing, you know. But also for me, like, why I like to do all the elements. Well, I don't DJ. I'm a closet DJ. I wish I could DJ.
Don't ruin it. I was gonna say, bro, like that was one whole like spiel. I've yet to see DJ Mistery.
I have a set of 12s at home and a mixer.
Yes.
You know, and big props to MK1 and Russ that helped me get that together.
Shout out
But
to MK1
my wife
for
used
sure.
to study turntablism, funnily
Okay.
enough. And so she was like, let's get a turntable, and then well, if we're going to get one, might as well get two. But I've had, you name it, every DJ explain to me how to DJ. Nino Brown, Samurai, ASK, all these dudes are my friends, and they've like at some stage said, why don't you try this? And I'm like, oh, which is the fast one and which is the slow one? And do you turn the volume down when you pull it back? You know, but I just can't get my head around it. But the other elements that I can actually do, they have a different sort of expression for me. And I suppose first and foremost, and maybe it's because I did breaking first, I still must see myself as a b-boy first.
B-boy first.
You know, and then an MC, you know, like b-boying for me is still the most fun. Not that I'm breaking that much anymore. I mean, I'm turning 50 this year. You know what I mean?
Jesus.
But I still love to get down.
50.
Oh, thanks, man.
What you?
It's
are
oil
you
of
serious?
Oil of Ole.
Oh.
But like
It's something.
but if I hear like It's Just Begun or like Breaker's Revenge or Rock Creek Park or whatever, I have to throw down. Like,
Straight
it's just
up.
raw for me is breaking. But MCing is more, you know, like if I have to say something that's specific.
Yep.
And graph for me, a lot of it is about the community of it. I love like jamming with other writers and bouncing
Yeah.
ideas. It's the interactive nature of it that I kind of dig, you know.
I like that you say that sort of. I like how you bring the community aspect into it, because, you know, I do feel as though that's probably an aspect that, you know, coming up as well for me, and I suppose I'll sort of touch on it now, but you know, coming up in the 90s, it was a bit, the community aspect, I feel there was a bit of a wedge between some of us newer guys coming up, you know, and where we got our influences from, because then there was a commercial element to hip hop that was, you know, starting to get played. We had a lot more access to stuff that you guys didn't have access to. You know, we could go get import CDs relatively easily. I don't remember Soul City even opened up in Bankstown. There was Soul Sense in Para in the city, and then they had Soul City over at Bankstown, and you know, so you know, we had that accessibility. So our influences then became far more international and a lot less local.
Yeah.
Right. And as a result, you know, someone like myself who, I wasn't necessarily very, very much about the elements as much as I was like really about the MC craft, right? I probably didn't have that knowledge of the culture. But then at the same time, like there really was a bit of a disjoint between, the guys that were really cultural, like really knew, were educated, started from breaking, started from graph, went into the MCing, the DJing, whereas we didn't have that, So how did you feel during that 90s period where there was maybe, new guys coming up and you maybe because you would have felt it, you know how you're talking about that push down?
Yeah.
Because we really felt that. Like we really felt like there was guys that had been around, but like we felt like we were getting pushed like down,
Yeah. There was sort of like a little bit of a guardians of hip hop, and that still remains.
I was about to say, it's not like that has really gone away. That element.
Yeah. But I think
the fifth element of hip hop is guardians.
Yeah. Actually, there's a joke about that. Actually,
Oh.
How many old schoolers does it take to change the light globe?
How many?
1 to change the light globe, and 2 to complain about how they used to do it better back in the days. Hey, as an old schooler, I can say that.
True
but
that.
I think some of it's out of fear. You know what I mean? It's like, these new guys are gonna lose the culture and all that sort of stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And obviously there is that. There are people that are just gonna jump on the bandwagon just to rap because they heard this song and it's easy to do, they think, or whatever. But I think that anyone that's worth anything will always sort of tip their hat to those that have come before. And I mean, you know, you mentioned before about Australia not being a hip hop nation. For us, you know, like we heard artists sampling James Brown and people like that, and we were like, who are these people? Who are these people that they're sampling? And so hip hop actually gave me a curiosity about people like James Brown or Parliament Funkadelic or whoever was being sampled. And I think that, you know, if you're an MC that is really interested in the craft of it, you'll go, okay, right. You know, like some of the young guys that I work with, they might be into like your Eminems, your Tupac, like that's the generation that they came in on, you know, and I'll never take away from that because that's their experience, you know, but I'll say...
That's their truth sort of thing.
Yeah, but I'll say, actually, let me play some other artists that you might be interested in just from a wordsmith kind of perspective, like Gifted Gab from Black Alicious, where he's just like a freak of lyrical stuff, you know, or freak of lyrical stuff. You could tell I'm an MC that worded that so well, or your Rakims or Big Daddy Kane's or stuff like that. But I'm not saying everything that you're listening. Yeah, I'm not saying your stuff is crap, you know, because it came later and this is great. No, because that's just rude for a start, you know.
Don't be rude.
Yeah.
Not
Hip hop's not
necessary.
about that.
I'll roundhouse kick a guy to the face for like staunching me if I'm putting up, but don't be rude.
It's all relative. Yeah.
So then I want to go like into faith a bit with you. You know, you're a pastor.
Apparently.
Well,
rumor has it.
Freshest pastor out, you know. Just being able to sort of exercise that, you know, positively and I suppose create that space, you know, I want to talk about, you know, your faith and you know, moving into, you know, how did you get into that, you know what I mean, in terms of you speaking, you know, of faith. You've obviously started Crosswords and that, you know, how did you get into that? And how did that become such a sort of big part of what you do as well?
It's funny because like people that know me now, they only know me as that. But like I said, I wasn't always like that. And it wasn't even something that I was really seeking out, I'll be honest.
Yep.
And in some ways, it made it more difficult for me, you know, because people would stereotype anyone of faith, whatever faith it is or whatever. And... But I think one of the things that hip hop promotes, and Zulu Nation had the thing about, you know, knowledge of self being an element of hip hop.
Yeah.
And for me, you know, I was always sort of like interested about identity and culture and all that sort of stuff. But I sort of came to the realization, okay, well, if you really want to know yourself, if you want to know who you are, you need to know why you are.
Yeah.
And so I started to question, you know, like, okay, knowledge of self means knowledge of God because, you know, God created you to be a certain way with certain guidelines, with certain sort of understandings of eternal stuff. Mm-hmm. And and like my family background is of mixed cultural and religious backgrounds. Yeah. And so I was like, well, which is the way, you know? And I actually preached on Sunday at like a church which is like a biker church, you know? And they had me speak about culture.
Yeah.
And I was like, you were created at a certain time with a certain ethnicity in a certain community for a reason, to have an impact, you know? Yep. And so, you know, I think that it's important for us to sort of see ourselves in a broader scheme of things, like in an eternal way, not just like our time on earth. And so, then it ended up that, you know, like I said, I wasn't interested in things of faith, but I sort of just put it out there and I was like, okay, God, which way do you want me to pursue? And then two people came into my life. One,
it's funny how it works, isn't it?
Yeah,
So,
out
so
of the
you
blue.
just throw the energy out. It's got to, you go, ask that question, and then all of a sudden things are just placed in your path. You're like, "Phew, look at that."
Yeah. And so one guy, he was Maori background from New Zealand. His family background was connected with Mongrel Mob and all that sort of stuff. And I was involved in the gangs at that particular time. Everyone was involved in the gangs in certain neighbourhoods in that sort of late 80s period, early 90s. And he sort of like picked all the worst kids to sort of work with, and he was a kick-ass guitarist, like sort of like your Eric Clapton, Jimi Hendrix sort of style. And I'm a music fan in general, and so I was like, oh, dope, let's talk music. And then another guy started working with the gangs in the inner west, and that's where I was based in one of the gangs at the time. And he started to teach. He was from a signwriting background, and so he started to work with a lot of the graph writers and say, listen, if you want to do this as a job, this is how you can do it. This is how you get a letter of approval. This is how you prep the wall so the paint lasts longer. And both of those guys came into my life, and they were where I was at that time.
Similar mind frame. Of
And I thought, you know what, I like what these guys are about, and to be honest, I could see God working through them, and so I saw Jesus in them, so to speak. And so that's my way of doing things as well. My way is just like, hopefully I can have some sort of impact by the way I carry myself. And, sometimes I can be a bit dodgy. I'm not perfect, but at least I'll be honest about it.
Honestly, I stole it.
So that's how I ended up in faith. But that said, at that time, that was the sort of like, late 80s. The church was not ready for people like myself. And
yeah, right.
And so
imagine that.
Yeah, and
it was still very pretty. Like it's been, obviously pretty staunch. Only even really up until recently in the scheme of things as well.
Yeah. And I mean, you got to understand. There's people that have lived a certain life since they've been born, and then all these dudes rock up dressed like a way they've never seen before with rat's tails at that time.
Hey, they still exist.
Yeah, and like breaking and doing illegal graffiti and doing other petty crime and punching on and all that sort of stuff, and it was so foreign to them. But those things, we sort of like sorted out what was good for us to continue and what wasn't good for us to continue.
Yep.
And then ultimately, I started to sort of, my crew got signed, and so we were touring around a lot, and I would meet like a local MC in Queensland that was a believer as well, and he'd be like, hey man, I love you guys, like I'm the only one doing this, and I'm like, hey man, us too. And our mate Jester, graph writer and former b-boy and can MC as well from time to time, he started kicking it with us, and then there became this little community, and then it ended up that that's when the internet started. Oh my goodness! Right? Yeah, and every enter was like 3 minutes of download, but
you have 39 years until your download is complete.
But we went to this. There was this festival, Christian festival, rock music festival, and they had us perform a little bit here and there. And these other guys came from interstate and from other parts of New South Wales, and we all met each other, and so we formed this group called In the Midst. And so there's a scripture in the Bible where Jesus said, "Where two or more are gathered in my name, I'm in the midst of them."
Yep.
And so that became this community. Then it went online and forums, and then people from other countries were contacting us and like, "Hey man, I'm in the same boat."
It's crazy.
Yeah, and then after that sort of had established for a while, actually my mate that I spoke at his church on Sunday, he works with bikers and all that sort of stuff, and he was like, "Listen, why don't you start a hip hop church?" And I was like, "Bro, I would love to go to that hip hop church, but I don't want to be the one starting it."
Yeah.
But, but I was probably the one most qualified. And so with a few people, we started Crosswords, and we'd meet together once a month and have a hip hop service. So instead of like singing church songs, it was all rap. We'd have breaking performances. Everyone did an element pretty much, that like spoke or whatever. And then other people started hearing about that interstate from the In the Midst community and beyond.
Yep.
And they were like, "Can we start branches?" And we were like, "Cool." So it became like a national network. And then we decided to have like a conference called Uprock. And so we did that. And then we flew in other people prominent like hip hop artists from other parts of the world. And our whole thing is like one of the sayings at Crosswords is skills is currency.
Yeah.
You know? And because like you can go anywhere, and if you've got some skills and you meet heads, I'll give you props, and then you develop a community.
Yeah.
And the whole thing, there's a bit of a stereotype that Christians are always like B grade at everything, like, but there's like world class. Yeah, it's true.
Damn Christians,
Yeah.
B-grade Christians.
Yeah, but like one of our friends, he's a b-boy. He like won like every international b-boy comp. He's a Canadian Filipino guy, but was living in Korea, and so he was like undefeated. And so we were like, hey man, you come and teach us breaking, and so B-Boy Dizzy and Fat One and Saves and Diva from New Zealand from their crew TMD, they'd won like twice the Molotov Graf battle in Germany and stuff like that, and one's a deacon and one's a minister, so we'll like come out, hang with us, and so it was all about upskilling, but it was all about community. And then some of those other countries, then they said, can we start branches in our countries? And so Crosswords, I can't even... I think we're in six different countries, 7 different countries now, something like that. And we put on, or they put on uprocks in their countries as well. So I've been to an uprock in Canada, an uprock in Malaysia. They do another one in New Zealand called Street Talk, but it's basically uprock as well.
Yep.
And it's just gone gangbusters. And so,
man, how does it feel to be? I mean, like fuck, how inspiring to essentially be one of the people that essentially started such a positive, community. Because look, the other thing that I have to say, knowing you for, years now, and, you've never been one to be forceful of anything on anyone. It's like, hey man, come down, here for you. If not, orgy, do you know what I mean? Like it's party character. So, for that energy to really come, full circle and really sort of, almost perpetuate itself, man. It must be a good feeling to be part of that original.
Yeah, I mean, no one wants to be told what to do, you know what I mean? And so I think it's important just to be there.
Yep.
And then people reach out when they're looking for answers and things like that, and sometimes, at Uprock, it's about people developing their faith. Other times it's about people coming and going, I just want to learn from this person that's the best in this craft.
Yep.
And they don't have to be down with the faith thing. Like that's all good, man. You know what I mean? But I think it's getting to the point now where finally Crosswords is getting to where I want it to be, where it goes back to the beginning. It was like, cool, man, I just want to go to that.
Yeah.
And so
I
there's
just want to be there.
Yeah.
You make it like, bro, I'm going to be at the next joint.
Yeah. And so there's people that are running it now.
Yep.
The monthly event and stuff like that. And so I can just sort of like pull back and sort of like just oversee, help out a little bit, and man, I want to start pursuing my own art again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And things like that, and pushing it.
100%, man. Bro, so sick. So sick. Wanted to, speak on Brethren. You know what I mean? Like, and, how that developed, and obviously with, that, having that split, Death Wish cast, Brethren, you guys sort of being collective, crew as well. And, man, how were, how was it in those years touring and stuff like that, and being involved in it? Because it was early hip hop. What were the gigs like? I have to ask these questions because I suppose that when I was coming up, there was somewhat of an established circuit. You know what I mean? It wasn't as hard to get down and rock a mic, and it is a bit of a bitch to get a venue. Particularly with the fucking guys tagging the toilets and shit like that.
Still,
but, yeah, 100%. But how was it, in those early days in terms of like getting those shows and booking your stuff and trying to make it, you bloody what you look like, sort of rough dudes trying to come in and so be like, oh man, we want to book your venue, this, that, and we're going to bring a mad crowd down and whatever.
No one wanted it. Yeah, and there was no industry, and so like the industry was rock music. They weren't interested in anything to do with hip hop, and so you might get a few little club gigs, but they were like few and far between. And we were in the West, man, so we weren't going into those sort of areas. So a lot of the gigs were us putting on our own gigs in some community centre or a PCYC. They were glorified blue light discos, but like hip hop music
Yeah.
with a few punch-ons and the toilets getting bombed. And so then it was like, okay, that venue's like not good for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next one.
Did you ever do Sefton High?
Oh yeah, I never did hip hop gigs there, but
Okay.
yeah, but we went
You
on.
did Blue Lights.
Yeah, we went on Punched On with the Headbangers back in the days. You know, the scene was very split then. But you know, it was we had to do everything ourselves, and so even people just learnt how to record. They bought their own equipment, and you know, like our first recording was with Aveen from Citasia and DJ Soup from Funky Nomads, and they just were dudes that just like sort of worked it out themselves. And then when we went to mix it, we were working with professional studio guys, and they were like, where did you guys learn this stuff? And they were like, oh, we just taught ourselves, you know. And so it was really a case of like, you just got to make it up as you go along. And same with like promoting gigs and labels and all of that sort of stuff, you know. And so, you know, we released a tape, like an actual tape. That was the first thing we ever did.
Yeah.
And it was just like self-titled. It had like 6 tracks on it because that's what we could afford to get in the studio to do.
How many copies?
I think it was like 100, you know, and I haven't even got one. I've got the tape, but I haven't got the cover.
Really?
Yeah. It was photocopied anyway, so I could just photocopy it off my mate T-Op. He's got one, black and white even, man, not even color. That's how friggin' bodge. But you know,
Bro, what are you talking about? That would have been like creme de la creme back then.
Oh,
still,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
As far as hip hop went.
But those things are collectible now. You know what I mean? I've still got heaps of tapes of people, you know, and I just don't want to play them because all the ghetto blasters will probably just like start having the tape
Ripping
coming out.
them
And I'll have to get the big pen out again.
Yeah,
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
But
start getting like pulling the tape out, like taping it back, and just making sure that
yeah,
it's
so
all
it
juice.
misses out like a bit of the song for
Yeah.
half a second.
Oh, this is my favorite punchline. Oh no, it's gone.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
gone now.
cool,
Yeah, you got to
that.
do it yourself.
Yeah,
Insert punchline. But it was just a case of like we had to do it ourselves, and then I think Sound Unlimited were the first ones that got signed. I think they got signed to Sony, and they had some chart success.
Yeah, they did. Which how was that feeling for you guys? Because they were, you know, they weren't. I suppose we'll go to this as well. This is a good probably segue. They weren't rapping, you know, Australian.
Yeah.
You know, we sort of talked about this, you know.
Yeah. So
off camera.
everyone that I know.
I want to say definitively.
Yeah. Thanks, KRS One.
Yeah, okay.
No, everyone that I knew rapped in an American accent.
Yep.
You know, and us included. But so Sound Unlimited were doing some bigger gigs, and the opening acts were us, Brethren, and Death Wish Cast.
Yeah.
And so we went up to Newcastle with them, and we did a gig. We brought our mate Muffy, and he jumped up with us, and met Tons One and those guys that are like the Newcastle
Tons.
scene now.
Yeah.
We did
Shout
another
out to
gig at
Tons.
Fairfield at the Tivoli Hotel, and that was Sound Limited. And so we've always had mad props for them.
Yep.
Also, you know, we were doing gigs at Kinsella's. Kinsella's had some nights. You know, Scott Wolf and those guys were putting on gigs, the Triple TP nights. ASK was like Buddha Bill, Bad Rep, those guys. And then younger crews like us, 046. There were so many, you know, that were like the sort of emerging artists.
Yep.
But yeah, back to the accent thing. So as I mentioned, you know, Sarek and I were part of this crew, Superstars, before we were like rapping seriously.
Yep.
We were rapping in our mate's house and all that sort of bizzo. But we met this DJ. He was from the UK, and he played us a documentary called Bad Meaning Good, and it was about UK hip hop.
Yep.
And in it, they talked about rapping in Yardie accents, so Jamaican accents, and using their own accents. And so for us, we were like, I'd never thought of that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. We were trying to make music like the music we were listening to.
Yep.
And so we started to go, okay, cool. And then he played us UK hip hop.
Yeah.
And
how was that to your ears? Because like even when I first, because I had heard so much American, and then I remember when I first heard Australian, I couldn't listen to it. It was so grating.
Yeah.
Was that the same with here in the UK? Was it that awkward as well, or?
Yeah, not UK so much because it was still foreign.
Yeah.
But so So Rek and we started to sort of like talk about it, started experimenting with trying to bring our own accent into it. And then in 88, we went to Melbourne. I just finished my HSC, giving my age away. I already did. We went to Melbourne, and we didn't really know anyone, but Blaze knew Ransom, and Ransom said, I'll meet you at Flinders Street Station. And Flinders Street? I forget anyway. There was a Graph Riders bench there at the train station, and Richmond Station. And so we went there, and Sydney hip hop at that time was like Fila tracksuits, Kazals, Kangols, the whole bit. And we went down there and we met the Melbourne Riders, and they were like marble wash jeans, flannies, long hair. And we were like, are these guys riders or bogans? You know what I mean? But, you know, because we were like so B-boy, and there was only a few people in Melbourne that were B-boy, but like dressed-wise and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But we ended up becoming mates with the Melbourne Riders. They introduced us as well so Ransom introduced us to Jewel, Pac D, a whole bunch of the other guys down there. I met Reason as well at another stage as well. And and AKA Brothers, who was Pac and all those guys, they had a song where a vinyl where they rapped in Australian accent.
And vinyl's like official.
Yeah, that's it. And so I would say that's the first time I heard Australian accent in rap. And it was, and like you said, it was just, wait a second. It's like when you see it in a movie and you don't expect it. It's an American movie and there's an Australian character.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, it must be Australian.
And then you're like, fuck, do I really sound like that?
Yeah. And so we were like, oh, okay, they're onto it. And so we came back with that sort of like as something that we wanted to sort of like pursue a bit more. Yeah, and then Sarek formed Death Wish Cast with Dicey and Death Wish, and then me and Wiz formed Brethren, and then we started. And if you hear our early stuff, you can hear that there's like a sort of a fluctuation.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
I got to tell you a funny story about.
Please, this is what we do the podcast for.
The DJ. So the guy that was like teaching me about the sign writing stuff and all that, he said to me, and Sareki goes, I heard there's this graph writer from the UK, and he's a B-boy, and he's working at BBC, right, the hardware store in Newtown, right? And we were like, oh, okay, cool, let's go meet him. So we rock up, and he's like working there, and we were like, hey, man, we heard you're into hip-hop and all that. And he's like, yeah, man. And we're like, oh, how have you found Australia so far? And he goes, man, I've been here for like 3 days. He goes, and I got mugged. And he goes, I was actually down looking at a piece that you guys did at Erskineville Station.
Yeah.
He goes, and these two guys mugged me. One was an Islander guy and one was an Aboriginal guy. And he goes, but they videoed themselves mugging me. He goes, like the ultimate like diss, you know what I mean? Anyway, I was like, oh, far out, man. Sorry to hear that. You know what I mean? Anyway.
Bro, that would have been like the fucking VCR recorder.
Yeah. That would have been like that big, yeah. Like a ghetto blaster size. So anyway.
Wait. Go.
Yeah. And so anyway, I think it was the next day, I went to see some of my homies, and I was just kicking it at their house, and they go, hey, Matt, man, funniest thing yesterday. We were like videoing your piece. We had this, like, they wanted to make a documentary about the life of people in the inner west, whatever. Yeah. And they gave us a video camera, like Metro TV or something. And he goes, and there was this dude there, and he had these, like, new Nikes on. He goes, so we rolled him for his shoes, and we videoed the whole thing, man. And I was like, dude, I just met that guy, man. You know? And they were like, oh, sorry.
You're robbing the homies.
Yeah, and they were like, oh, sorry, I didn't realize he was your mate. And I said, he's not my mate, I just met him. But come on, man, you know what I mean?
But still,
and then about 6 months later, I introduced them to the guy, and he was like, listen, man, I'm really sorry, you can have the shoes back. And he's like, bro, you've been wearing them no socks for the past 6 months, you can keep them, you know what I mean? So,
last thing I need is athlete's foot.
But that dude, you know, Tasia, he ended up becoming a rave DJ later on, DJ G Wiz, and but yeah, I would say that his influence on us as well with the UK hip hop was very, very much a pinnacle, you know? Yeah.
And those early days as well, I mean, you know, not to harp on it too much, you know, but did you, I almost talk about us, like, you know, because, like, we were the kids, you know, but was it hard to, because I remember just thinking, like, you can't tell me, man, like, you just can't tell me. I felt like content-wise, you know, particularly growing up in Bankstown in the 90s, early 2000s, you know, it got really rough at that stage. You know, like if it wasn't one person yet, would, you know, ducking and weaving, it was another person. You know, drugs were getting really big, and it
Still has its moments, man. I still live in Bankstown.
No, well, yeah, I know, and it really does. And you know, if anything, it's probably just expanded, right? Because now some of that mentality and some of those, you know, multicultural areas, you know, those melting pots of culture, you know, there's always a degree of tension, but it was really sort of popping off there. So we really related to American content.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is really about, you know, violence and you know, drug dealing and all that sort of stuff. Did you find it hard to sort of, sort of like convert some of those newer guys that were doing it within American Flow to, you know, given the commercial aspect of hip hop at that stage? Or
I think what was happening at the time too, it wasn't just about accent. It was about like Australia trying to work out who the hell are we, man? You know what I mean? We're like this, like, it's a colonized country of British that historically oppressed the Indigenous community, oppressed the Irish community. You know, like I'm part Irish. I don't know if you know, but Bankstown was nicknamed Irish Town back in the days, and it was a derogatory.
That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then we've got like so much influence from American TV, and then we've got like, you know, like growing up with Greek friends, Lebanese friends, Pacific Island friends, Indigenous friends, whatever, and we're like, what are we, man? You know what I mean? And I think that's why we maybe went to the extreme where we were like, it's got to be Aussie, you know what I mean? And then that sort of like, in a way, in some people's minds went a little bit far, you know, and then it became sort of like a little bit divisive, you know? And then anything that was seen with rapping with an American accent, you know, was seen as, oh, that's fake and we're real. And that was like a big line of demarcation.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I was one of the people, like I said, that was like, we were the first generation to start rapping in an Australian accent in Sydney. And
'cause that would have been a bit of a kick. That would have been a lot of hard work to try and...
We copped mad hate too.
100%.
You know, none of the clubs wanted to put anyone on that was rapping in an Aussie accent at the time.
Yeah.
But it ended up that, you know, oh man, I remember, and you guys mentioned it when Fresh was talking about, you know, when he went to Melbourne, and it was like, Melbourne doesn't play, you know, you got to bring your A game or forget it. And I remember going to Melbourne, and the accent thing was like, man, it was like, are you with us or are you against us? You know, and
yeah, well, even I felt that, you know, and funnily enough, man, it was at a Weapon X put on a gig.
Yeah. Well, they were part of that. They would have got that same stuff. Yeah.
But it was so funny because Weapon X was the producer, you know, behind a lot of it. He was never someone to segment it. He thought all styles were dope, right?
Yeah.
So he would put on these, weirdly enough, these gigs. I remember one particular gig where Infallible was down there, 360 was down there.
Yeah.
You know, Mantra was down there. All the hectic MCs from all walks of life just in one spot. But there was still, even though it was this community sort of gig where everyone's invited, there was still an element of like, nah, bro, like, you know, you do that and we do this. Do you know what I mean? In the same building.
Hard. We had it with one of our tours. We were touring with the USMC, but we had, I think, Weapon X and that, I think, performed on the bill, but I had Reason host it. And so there was like different, you know, at that time, factions. I know they're all homies in that now.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think they always have been, but, you know, like that's still the different ideologies at that time. And we were upstairs about to come down to do the set, and you could feel the tension in the air, and I was like, oh man. And it's been straight up, we prayed, and actually just everything just chilled out, and everyone just enjoyed the night, and it was like really good, man. You know what I mean? And I think blessed are the peacemakers, man. You know what I mean? And so,
100%, yeah.
and I mean, even though, like I said, I was part of that generation that sort of started to incorporate the Aussie accent. And one thing I would say is, I don't rap in an Ocker accent. I rap in my language. I don't put on an Ocker accent.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's a big thing as well, where things have started to really transition to.
Yeah, I think that's just as fake. If you don't talk like friggin' Jack Thompson and Paul Hogan, don't rap like that. You know what I mean? Like, I've got a sort of ethnic Greek, Lebanese, Aussie accent.
I call it
you
the
know what I mean?
Bankstown tongue.
Yeah. When my brother lives in New York, and when my brother and I and Viv caught up in Harlem, our Bankstownness came out much more. And people are like looking at us like, "Where are you from?" We're like, "We're from Sydney, bruh, from Australia."
We're from Sydney,
you know, like it becomes
around.
more. Yeah, it becomes more pronounced. But I forgot my point.
No, yeah, it's okay. I don't know. Well, I don't know. It was talking about like, you know, the two accents.
Yeah. So when we started Crosswords,
Yep.
the first service that we did, or jam or whatever you want to call it, specifically, I put on two artists, one that rapped with an American accent and one that rapped with an Australian accent, and said, "This is the standard. All are welcome." You know what I mean?
All are forms.
Yeah, and we're good, and that's going to be how it's going to be.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think that, look, it's certainly helped. I think there is a bit of an importance of, I think, authenticity. Ultimately, I think that's probably one point that I felt like I was always missing. Do you know what I mean? Was like true to self. You know what I mean? True to self, you know, and having that genuine aspect to your flow. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, you know, if you're trying to teach somebody to be the best version of them that they can be, but you're not doing it with your own tongue, then do you know what I mean? It sort of convolutes the message a bit. So I feel as though an element of it, and man, I wonder what your view is of this, because like some of those people that were real staunch, now they're not as staunch, right? But then I find myself being the person that's like really trying to I'm a mad advocate now for
right
like being yourself on the mic. And again, you say, if you're trying to force the Australian accent as well, that's equally as bad as trying to force an American accent. Do you know what I mean? So it's really just trying to like do you, and keep it that way, you know.
And there's nothing wrong with changing your mind, man. Like
I appreciate
that. One of my
homies. Appreciate you, bro.
Nah.
You are blessed.
But like one of my homies, and I would say one of the dopest MCs in Australia is a guy Neil Void from Melbourne. Yeah. And he came up touring with AC Alone with Reason and Pac. They were a crew at that time, I think, Centre Road. And anyway, he used to rap Australian accent, and now he's gone more on the American side of things. Yeah, right. You know, but man, he's on my album. You know, like doing what he does. I'm like, you're just dope. Like,
dope is
shut the gates.
I was thinking of doing like two albums, one Big Kid album, but the same album, but just in two different accents.
That would be very interesting.
Yeah, A-side, B-side.
Yeah.
Double CD like Tupac.
Battling yourself. Yeah, the battle within.
Called
schizophrenia. Yeah.
Titled. All right. Thank you. I'll give you credits. I'll shout you out in the CD cover if they still do CDs by then. Viv wanted to get me to ask
Nothing
you.
Probing. No probing questions,
We keep the probing till after the podcast,
okay?
Right.
No, alien invasion.
Yeah, exactly. How did it feel? Bankstown Council and Graffiti. You had a bit of a time there where Bankstown Council was very against graffiti.
Is this going to be like I'm going to get sued for
No,
this?
No, not at all. But she couldn't even remember what it was. Was there a time there where Bankstown was just like not about graffiti and they put a ban completely on it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who's going to watch this, but I'll just keep it real.
Here we go!
So initially...
We'll make sure they get it.
There was Bankstown Multicultural Youth Service and my homie Craig that, you know, is still doing stuff, you know, in the area.
Yep.
They got myself and Jester to come in, do some workshops with graph writers, and we were doing murals, like, you know, graph murals, letters, you know, with spray paint, the whole bit. And quality, man. You guys are like legends out of that. Oh, thank you. But also some of the younger dudes, you know, Mello and a few of the other guys. But it ended up that then that sort of started to change, and then the council was like, okay, we need to do murals, but no lettering, sort of making it a little bit less and less more sort of like seen as graffiti, but more just murals. And, you know, like, all right, we'll do a job, whatever, job's a job. And, at that time, one of the guys from the council, Jester was doing the job. I just rocked up to say what up. And this dude started asking me a lot of questions about, do you know who this dude is, who that dude is, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, dude, man, you're asking questions that are not cool, man. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to tell you for a start because I don't even know who you are.
Yeah, and you don't know what his motive is for asking these questions.
Yeah,
yeah.
And then apparently, down the track, I forget who it was, went to visit this particular dude at his office, and there was like information maps like CSI Miami type things with pins and all that. And we were like, oh, this dude's like passing on information using the art programs as a little bit of a front to sort of, gather information.
Holy crap.
Yeah, and so we were like, nah, we're pulling back from any involvement, And then I think that no writers wanted to do anything. So then they started to doing just murals with paintbrush and all that. Needless to say, the writers are like, forget that, and like capping them and bits and pieces.
It was like a mad turf war.
Yeah. But then it ended up that, down the track, things like 4E. I remember, I think it was a couple of the 4Es ago where...
2015, I know the 4E.
But one of them actually mentioned graffiti art. They didn't call it street art. They called it graffiti art.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh, they went there. They used the G word,
In Bankstown.
Yeah. And so that was a big plus. And I think having the art centre, that sort of does a bit of everything, but graph is part of it, makes it a little bit more palatable to people that aren't ready for the real. You know what I mean?
The people that are like, strategically trying to pin you all and frame you all, see you all behind bars.
Yeah. But I think that, like a lot of these areas, they want to sort of like portray that there's no graffiti in the area. But it's like, it's not true, man. You know what I mean? I know so many councils that like have knocked down legal walls because it like seem to be they're endorsing illegal graffiti or whatever, and they knock down the legal wall and then the place gets trashed. It's like, hey man, just like support the writers. There are dudes that want to do it legal. You know what I mean? Don't force their hand, and of course there's always going to be a legal graph, Both of them can coexist. It's fine, you know what I mean? But for the writers that want to do legal stuff, go for gold, man,
Do you feel as though, do you feel as though there's still a lot of pushback? Because you would know now, because you're older, wiser.
Hopefully wiser.
Yeah. But you're older, you've essentially had experience now where it's like, you've had to put on the professional cap with regards to, legal walls and know how to maneuver, who to talk to. You've worked with councils with regards to youth work and stuff like that. And, do you feel as though still to this day there's pushback when it comes to being seen as endorsing graffiti as a council?
Yeah. They can easily use the word street art, but they'll never use the word graffiti.
Really?
So rarely, and so, it's like street art is like the tiger in a cage, whereas graph is the tiger in the wild, even if it's legal, and I think because it's, like, don't get me wrong, man, I've done jobs and it would be considered street art. It's like an image or something like that. But at the end of the day, graph's about letters and it's about people's egos to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's about identity. As an individual.
Yeah, but people don't want to necessarily see that, and quite often I've sort of explained it from an art perspective to people and gone, okay, when you think of art, I'm talking like your average sort of like dude on the street, what is it? And they'll go, oh, it's like portraits and landscapes.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's Western art. All right, let's look at Eastern art, where like lettering is an art form in itself, Islamic art, Orthodox Jewish art, Asian art, Celtic art.
Yes.
Lettering is a thing in itself, you know. And so...
You've obviously had to justify this a number of times.
Heaps, yeah.
Get
And
out the textbooks.
Yeah, and my whole thing
Literally.
as well is trying to sort of like balance the different worlds, because people have different motives for doing graph.
Yep.
And there are kids that are like coming out of art school and they want to use spray paint. I'm like, yeah, sweet. There are dudes that are like, destroy all lines, and I'm like, that's your thing, go for gold. I'm not going to tell you what to do, that's not my job.
Yeah.
But part of my role, especially like where I work at Street Uni, is like to say, if you want to do legal stuff, I can help you do that. And that's like the guy that showed me about how to sort of like write, letters of permission, get letters of permission written and all that. And so like with the young writers I work with, I'll say, all right, man, let's do a workshop on how to write an invoice. And then they'll be like, oh, that's boring, man, whatever. And then they get their first graph job and they're like, how did you do that again, man? And little things like that. And, like, all right, if you're doing a legal wall, this is how you prepare the space, because it's got to last for years, it's not like you're doing a quick throw up.
Yeah.
It's got to, your client wants it to, they're paying for it. They want it to last.
Time.
Yeah, that's
straight
it.
up. with regards to, street uni, obviously we've got Eski here as well, massive in street uni, and you know, man, what a beautiful thing. Honestly, like I wish there was something like that for us when we were, younger. That, how has it been? How did you get into the youth work properly? And you were in youth work before it became like a street uni.
Uni, so I've been with street uni for, I think it's 12 years now it's been going, but I was already doing it. So how it worked out was I lived in Petersham for a while, so the Marrickville Council was doing some projects, and there was big gang problems at the time. So they did this project where they got different gangs to work with the council gangs, like the dudes that fix the road and all that sort of stuff. And each crew or gang, whatever, worked with them, came up with a design, and we got paid $200 or whatever it was, still total, and supplied tucks and paint, and we did a piece, and so I got paid for that, with my other mates and all that, and then that ended up in the newspaper, like a local newspaper, whatever, and then a few people started to contact that.
The Torch.
Yeah. And
that's a little Bankstown joke.
Yeah, and it ended up that Marrickville Youth Resource Centre, where I was working, or I was a young person at the time, got approached and they said, "Oh, listen, can you send over one of your writers that's a little bit more experienced to work with our guys, and we'll do some crossover stuff." And they were like, "Who wants to teach a bunch of kids?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll give it a bell." I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was only 17 myself, and so I just sort of like tried to work out, how do I do it? I don't know. And so I had to work out how to teach what I did. And that is my youth work, what do you call it, qualifications. I haven't actually studied youth work, I just sort of like did it.
Yep.
And now I've been doing it for, I don't know how many years, 30 years, whatever,
Man, and how does it, I know this sounds like, how do you feel? No, but like, man,
I'm over it. No.
I'm just gonna become a. I don't know,
have to work with like knobs like Eski.
Oh, stop it! You're just saying how attractive he was.
He's a beautiful
before.
man. He's a beautiful man.
He is. Yeah. But to see it grow then into somewhere where all elements can be expressed, and man, it's such a great platform. I always meet such like awesome people at whenever I go to Druitt, coming down to Livo. Obviously I wasn't as involved, but even you and I have sort of reconnected through coming down to Livo. And how does it feel to have all those elements in, I suppose, a space where it's like encouraged to to be a form of expression for these kids and guys that because that's why we were up to no good, was because we didn't have those spaces where it could be like, yo, we can just go down, do it, kick it, battle, record, paint, DJ, whatever, and not be judged, bloody thrown out, told off, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's always been a case of like, let me facilitate what the young people want to do. Yep. I don't want to come in and go, I'm going to lecture you for 3 hours. Actually, KRS did 3.5 hour lecture, but sorry, it's no diss on KRS.
Bless you, KRS one.
Like hip hop culture, what it's all about. It's like, okay, man, what do you want to do? And for example, initially Crosswords went there to help just volunteer, when it was on the first day at Livo, and we just had a few writers, a few MCs, we just joined in the cyphers, that was about it. And then they said to me, oh, listen, they knew I did graph stuff, and they were like, can you work, I think it was like half a day a week? And I was like, yep, cool, just doing graph workshops. And I just noticed there was a few dudes hanging around that were dressed like b-boys, whatever. I was like, oh, you guys b-boys? And they're like, yeah. I was like, me too.
Let me show you the moonwalk.
They were like, damn, no one's done that since Michael Jackson did it.
Like, damn, what is that moving? I never seen it.
Why is he walking away from us? But
no, I'm just letting you have your turn.
Yeah. But then I was like, well, why don't we just set up a night where you guys break? And so we'll just open up the space, and it's easy. All you need to do is get a lino for bugger all, have some sort of sound system, And at that time, Crosswords was like, listen, we had a few breakers, Rankster, Boogie, rest in peace, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And we were like, we'll volunteer to run it. And so we just sort of opened it up, and Christy and a few of us, we just sort of like every Tuesday night was like the B-Boy night. And then that became one of the most popular programs at Street Uni.
Yeah.
You know? And now
anyone can sort of do that, you know, as well.
That's it. You just open up the space and go for gold. Now, fortunately, we've got B-Boy Kamikaze that's working at Street Uni, you know, and he's still current, like in the breaking scene and battling and, you know,
and doing strongman contests,
like us, obviously, you know, like.
I mean, we were the leaders of the strongman contest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but also, you know, like just to have, you know, like the studio set up and working with engineers. And the collaborative nature of it, man, you know what I mean? Like the stop, collaborate, and listen program, you know, where MCs meet other MCs. They form like little crews and then they work on projects together, you know. And I think especially in light of what's going on with like this whole sort of like isolation thing, the fact that communities like this exist, even if it's online temporarily, it's good, man. Otherwise, just people feel like they're just plodding along by themselves. It sucks.
I think the good thing about it as well is, you know, because there's that element and the element aspect to it, and then there's also the community aspect. It's funny I say element because I actually met that young MC element from Livo, and like I stay in contact, and you know he then came across and did 4E. Because I was like, hey man, actually there's a workshop over here I think you'd get a lot from, and blah blah blah.
That's it.
But you know, it's good as well because it's encouraging those positive aspects of hip hop rather than what would normally be seen as, you know, all the you know, the shit aspects of it that are usually thrown in the basket with it. And encouraging, you know, those the positive foundational pieces of it, you know what I mean, and putting it in there in a positive way, even though, you know, there's still crews coming through that are doing, you know, their thing and expressing the neighborhoods and all that sort of stuff.
I mean,
you know?
hey man, you go through those stages and you live and learn, and life takes a different direction, and you're doing different stuff, you know what I mean? Like, I know a lot of dudes that were like, oh, I'm never going to do legal stuff, or like, and they sort of dissed it a bit.
Yeah.
And then, hey man, they have a kid.
Next thing you know, they're on payroll.
yeah. But yeah, they have a kid, and then they're like, actually, man, I don't want to risk getting locked up because I won't see my kid, you know? And it's like,
Straight
here
up.
you go, man. Here's the wall, go for gold.
It's funny what
know?
kids do to you, isn't it?
Hard. Yeah.
We can all speak from that aspect these days.
But one thing I would add that I've really liked about working at Street Uni and also with the 4E stuff, but in particular Street Uni, pretty much all of us that work there do an element. And so we're still current. I don't like that whole thing of like, you know, those that can do, those that can't teach. I'm like, those that can do should teach, you know, and it's been pretty flexible with me. Like, for example, you know, like I'm still working as a writer, you know, like doing commissions and all that. And there've been times where I've had like a big job overseas and I'll have to go overseas for like a couple of weeks. And I'll say to the management, listen, man, I got this big job, I got to do it. And they're like, go for it. Because then the young people see you doing a job in like the UAE or Japan or something like that.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, that's Mystery that teaches us every week, but this is what you can do. And he's a dude from the neighborhood as well. And, you know, and we can approach him to like learn how did that door open or whatever. And also, you know, because some of us are still recording artists or doing tours or whatever, we'll bring people through, you know what I mean? Like I mentioned, we had KRS-One come and do a lecture, you know, Dead Prez came and you know, hung out with the guys and you know, chatted with them about hip hop, you know, Rocksteady Crew, New York City Breakers, like we've had legends like come through that building and interact with the young people, and you know, it's so dope when you see one of the kids from the community centers, whatever, go, man, I watched that dude on YouTube. And then there he is, like standing there, not just standing there, but willing to sit down with me and talk about what's this all about, you know?
I think, it certainly gives it a validity as well, you know, because there is I think you're right, like, you know, at least with my experience, and, you know, massive shout out as well to, you know, to 4E, because that really showed me, Viv gave me the opportunity, because I'd never I was like you with the... I didn't even know where to start.
Just jump in.
Actually, the funniest thing is, you know how you said, like, well, I've got to actually ask myself, how do I do this? I had to start to do that.
Yeah.
But then similarly so, because similar to what you said, is like because I was still current, because did have a job, or like they could see me on stage, with an international or whatever.
Yeah.
The impact then for them to absorb the information was, already there. Because, you see some people struggling to get through to them because it's like, well, you're not speaking my language.
Yeah.
It's not part of who you are. So, like, I can't absorb as easily, there's a bit of reluctance there.
Yeah. It builds a bridge when they have a respect for what you're doing, or even, like, stuff that you've done. Like, it's funny, because at Street Uni, quite often I'm painting. So yeah. I'm dressed in like Derelict from Zoolander. I'm like, they like
Derelict.
See me. Yeah, like who's this friggin' homeless guy? He must come in for the Oz Harvest stuff. And
you're like, well, I do, but
yeah. And then sometimes like I'll pop my head in if there's like the MC group and all that sort of stuff. And then then
the MC group or the break fucking dress so fresh to death. Can't go along.
Yeah, but then like sometimes, like they'll mention an artist or whatever, and then maybe Randy might say, "Oh, Mystery open for that dude, for Ice-T or whatever, or Big Daddy Kane or whatever." Like, what? They don't even know I'm an MC.
This bum.
Yeah. Mate, if he can do it off the street, then anyone can. Yeah. So.
Yes, me.
Yeah. So it's funny like that. Like those doors can open up communication.
100%, man. How do you, and just with regards to 4E and what they're doing as well, how cool is it to see and be involved with now, like something that is as big as like festival and panel discussions and getting educated people sitting next to self-educated people within
scumbags basically.
Yeah. Say again.
Pretentious scumbags. Yeah. Anyway,
Absolutely, and I will wear my monocle with pride that I
My
got
cravat.
for 50 cents
Yeah.
at a market stall of Doris in Layla Park. No, but to see it come so far to a point where governments are funding and starting to facilitate workshops for the elements, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you and I get to sit down and chop it up and be like, yo, we're teaching these new kids, how to do whatever, like, did you ever sort of think back then that it would be where it is, now on a global scale?
No way. We were just doing it for fun.
Yeah.
Like I was saying to someone the other day, like I didn't take photos of my early graph because it was just like, oh, this is just something that I do.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was going to become my job. And I'd be doing it like 35 years later or whatever it is, 38 years later or whatever. And that's the same with, like the teaching thing is like, why do I do this? Like what do I love about it? How do I communicate that? How does this affect identity? And so now, I've done lectures at universities on Australian identity through the evolution of hip hop. And stuff like that. And it's still a work in progress. And I think that's why it's important not just to have the lectures, but to have the discussions. Because my experience isn't everyone else's experience. And I love to hear other people's version of it, I remember me and Wiz, we did this, we were recording a track for Brother Black's album.
Yep. And
we were doing it at a radio station, which I will not mention, but it's quite known for being talkback radio redneck type of thing, and
we all know what it is.
And I said to Brother Black, and I said to him, isn't it interesting that here we've got an Indigenous Australian that they probably pay out on Indigenous stuff in their talkback stuff.
Yeah.
And also an immigrant that came here basically as a political refugee was from Chile and because of the Pinochet thing.
Yeah.
And then like this illegal graph writer that is like the descendant of like convicts / Jewish and Irish immigrants.
Yeah.
And but we're all mates. And so then we did a track, What's It Mean to Be Australian?
Yeah,
and it talked about all of our stories are so different, but we're all united by our hip hop community and the fact that, man, I love you, bro. You know what I mean? And stuff like that. So I think that hip hop is helping to clarify what it means to be Australian.
Yeah, it's starting to give it identity.
Yeah, and even though like that whole like Oka thing. Is a sort of like subgroup of Australian hip hop. That's valid for some people.
Yeah, 100%.
Some people is like
you can't take away
Raz.
from it.
That's it.
Same way we can't take away, how other people would express as well now.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, and it's funny. Like even for me, like I've been doing an online radio show for Street Uni.
Yep.
And I've been doing like, obviously I did.
Thanks for the plays, by the way.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I did like a timeline of Australian hip hop and all that.
Yep.
But I did one the other day and it was like Aussie rock, and for me it's been like soul searching, because
tapping into
because
that,
it was like I mentioned about like having beef with the headbangers. You'd go to the Blue Light Disco and they'd be playing the Radiators and Midnight Oil and stuff like that, and they'd hate us homies or bombers or whatever.
Bombers.
And
100%.
and so we couldn't go to Cronulla Beach because they'd be like looking to punch on with us and stuff like that, and sometimes it'd be good because we want to punch on. But yeah,
sometimes we'll go in there looking to
but,
punch
and
on.
this is pre Cronulla riots. This is like 20 years before that.
Yeah.
And so I was sort of like, I don't really dig that stuff, And then
you were reluctant, not because of what it was, but because of what
the
it
association.
represented.
The association.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I did a trip around the world, and I was overseas for like 6 months or something. And I remember I was walking past an Aussie pub in England or Ireland or something like that, and they were playing Barnsley, and I was like, hell yeah. And then I started to
Shout to my man Barnsley.
Yeah, and I go, you know what? I've got to get over other people's prejudices and the fact that I'm not supposed to because I'm a hip hop head. And I was like, nah, man, like Ivor Davies, mate, and Mondo Rock, like. And so I was like, nah, actually, I dig this too, and this is part of my Australian identity, as much as, funnily enough, hip hop is.
Yes, I feel.
And all the artists that have influenced me from Australia, like I said, aka A Brothers, Reason, like Death Wish Cast, Sound Unlimited, 046, Bad Rep, all these different dudes,
Yeah, 100%, man. In terms of the this day and age, and people that you've been blessed to work with and stuff like that, who are you checking for? Who are you watching make moves these days and looking to and going like, wow, these guys are really pushing the envelope?
I mean,
either commercially or even community.
Yeah, I mean, the other day you interviewed El Fresh, and
100%.
And we worked at Street Uni together for many years, and I remember seeing one of his early gigs at the PCYC in Livo.
Yep.
And we talked after, and that was the first time we'd met. And I think that whole thing of like what's Australian identity, like that's case in point.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Up,
and the fact that like he mentioned the whole thing about how he sort of like the conversation was brought up. Oh, next photo shoot, don't wear your turban.
And which is crazy, hearing that.
And he mentioned that to me, and I was like, dude, don't compromise your faith. Your faith is more important than anything, mate. You know what I mean?
100%, yeah.
And
that's crazy. So he had spoken to you about that.
Yeah.
That would have been so powerful,
the conversation at Street Uni.
What a situation as well. Like just a man of faith, discussing like hip hop and what it means to keep in yourself, stay true.
Yeah. And that's it, because like your spiritual identity is eternal, as opposed to the hip hop period, which is like 100 years max. You know what I mean? But I'm watching more and more as like I think one of his newest tracks, he raps in Punjabi.
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
I just watched that the other day. It was hectic.
Yeah, and I've started to do that as well. Like, so part of my background is Jewish, like I mentioned, and even though I'm a Christian minister, funnily enough. But so the other day, Prophet. So shout out to Izzy and the Prophet.
Yeah,
he hit me up to rap on a track with a guy from South Africa, and he was like, "Can you rap in Hebrew?" And my Hebrew isn't super great. I learnt it later on, but it's very broken. But I ended up doing a rhyme that's maybe 1/3 in Hebrew. And I remember once, early on with Wiz and Brethren stuff, because he was from Chile, he did a track that was all in Spanish called Pasa la Cuchara, which means pass the spoon. And it was all about his story of like coming to Australia when the Pinochet stuff happened, and I think that language is something that is that's culture, man. You know what I mean? And so people that explore that they'll always get my attention, because I think it's very, very important.
Hectic, 100%, man. For yourself, talking about yourself for a second and what you got coming up.
That's all I've been talking about is myself, basically.
No, you've been talking about things.
Oh, okay.
Things around yourself. But what have you got coming up? What have you got coming up, like at the moment? you know, what are you working on currently? Because it was funny, you know, like we did that cipher together for Street Uni, and you were like, yo, like, fuck, you know, I'm kicking rhymes again and whatever. You know, everyone gets caught up. Life, you know.
Yeah,
I mean, you're a b-boy first, so you know, I just didn't want to jump the gun and assume you were going to spit like a fucking Flame 16 for my new mixtape. But what's coming up for you, man? Like, you know, obviously you got Street Uni. Have you got any projects coming out? Like any sort of collab things? Or?
Yeah. So there's a project that I got underway. So Wiz and I were doing stuff for a while as brethren, and then that sort of metamorphosized into this other crew called Apollo Creed, which was working with Oakbridge as well, another MC from Crosswords.
Yep.
And then Wiz has sort of like moved on in his life away from hip hop and stuff. So I was like, oh man, we've got no producer. You know, what am I going to do? Yeah. And so Randy's been producing some beats that I've had my eye on for a while.
Shout out to Randy.
Yeah, he's killing it.
The fire.
Yeah. So I've got a project that I want to do with Randy where I jack 3 of his beats basically and do a specific project with him. But that was good to jump on that.
Yeah.
So that sort of like, it had been a few years since I'd actually written some original stuff, and that was just battle rhymes. So I was like, oh, it's fun, man, battle rhymes. But a project that I've got going in addition to that is there's a documentary that's being made at the moment about Arthur Stace, you know, Eternity, Mr. Eternity.
Yeah.
And so if people are unfamiliar with him, I would say he's probably the first graph writer in the world. Born in Sydney in 1885.
Yeah.
And did his first tag, Eternity, in 1932, 14th of November 1932. So he died in 1967, which is when Cornbread started in America, and then that went into Taki 183 in the New York scene. So as far as like the first person to write a tag, I would say it would be Arthur Stace. Maybe people would argue with that, but I think, you know, it's pretty clear that it's like a tag name sort of thing, because they labeled him Mr. Eternity. Anyway, so there's a documentary. Oh, and his name ended up on the Sydney Harbour Bridge on the year 2005 New Year's Eve celebrations.
Yeah.
And so it ushered in the millennium, you know, and so
very
like
powerful.
that's crazy story. And he's from Sydney.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, this is dope. They're going to do a documentary about him. They approached me and said, could you be part of it and just talk about his connection with the graph? And I was like, mad. He's like, and he was a believer as well, you know? And so I'm like, oh, even better connection.
Yeah.
But I was like, listen, me and my mate Jabs, we'd started talking about doing a track about his life. And so I was already sort of like starting to, I had points and what I wanted to say. Ended up that the documentary guys were like, listen, we can connect you with the guy that wrote the biography of Arthur Stace. I was like, sweet. So I ended up writing like basically 3 verses that outline this guy's life, going back and forth with the guy that wrote the biography, the leading expert on this guy, on Arthur Stace, and recorded that. And part of it was to do a mural which actually has the timeline of his life. And so Rossano and I, we found a wall that is like only 100 meters from where he did the first tag in Darlinghurst. And so we started the mural, but unfortunately, because it's a heritage listed area, the council wouldn't let us finish it. And so at the moment, we're in the process of like trying to get a DA so we can finish this mural, which I think is very historical.
100%.
And that will be part of the images for the music video. And so that's just like a one-off thing, but but it'll be connected.
But it's big.
Yeah. And I think there's talk of actually even having an official Eternity Day as well. So like if that comes through, that's like graph history, like a country or a state that celebrates a graph writer. Like that's crazy history, you know?
Oh, that's hectic. So just, you know.
So watch this space.
Just a little something coming up on the on the horizon.
Yeah.
Bro, it just blew my mind. What the hell? Yo, man.
Oh, and that's produced by Soul Option. I don't know if you know Soul Option.
100%.
Younger emerging artist who's been killing it. Love his flow and all that, but he's also a dope producer. So he's produced the beat, and we've been working alongside him with Crosswords as well.
Bro, I love it. It's like old, new, old. It's crazy, man. Mad insightful. I'm sure we got questions. Do we have questions, Eski?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Hit the man with some questions.
I was never there.
Mystery, what's your favorite production / piece to date?
Like
graph piece? Oh man, if it fluctuates.
It was the one that I asked him to do not long ago of me.
Probably.
Hey, big shout out to Mystery for doing my Godzilla.
And
piece.
should we go there with like the history of that the
We should.
full turnaround? So
Yeah.
I'll get to the favorite piece, right? But many years ago, I was a sellout. No, I was asked to do a design for Stealth magazine, and it was Coolism stomping on the MCs that didn't win the ARIA. Is that right? Was it?
I wasn't even nominated, so
Oh, wasn't it?
no.
Oh, okay.
Jay West was though,
Oh, okay.
but
Well,
I
why
was
did they want me
being-
to draw you in it then?
because I was Fig Kid.
Oh, okay. All right. And so I drew.
I was vulnerable.
I drew Daniel-san and Hao basically like Godzilla or King Kong stomping on whack MCs. Nah, I'm joking. Nah, and
It's fine.
nah,
It's
and,
fine.
and then
I'm fucking amazing.
I,
right?
so I just drew it. I just drew it and I gave it to Stealth, and then I went to Japan. And then when I came back, you were like, "Bro, what was that all about?" And I was like, "Oh, sorry, man. I don't know. It was just a job to me."
No,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was a good job. But the worst part, did you hear about how and I had words about it?
Nah.
So, because I do cartoons as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
drew a picture of me with the ARIA, just casually
As a res-
stabbing Daniel.
Oh, that's dope.
I'll try and find it. I got a friend
Yeah,
of mine
that's
have
mad.
it. So I was.
This
I
is
was,
an article in itself.
Yeah, so I'm stabbing Daniel, and like the little comic, the little speech bubble said, "I think you guys forget why I'm here."
Yeah.
And then Hal came up to me at Metro and was like, "Bro,
What's up with that?
Well, like stabbing, like really?" And I'm like, well. I'm not some fucking bitch. Like, you guys were fucking stomping on my head. And it was like so we're having this argument about these fucking comic drawings. Do you know what I mean? But the funniest thing was, and I think probably the thing that cut me the most is because, bro, and you know this, I've said it so many times, being I mean, you see the cartoons all over me, for tattoos. Like, I'm such a fan of your style,
thanks,
right?
man.
Like hands down, one of my favorite styles, so for me, it's a big thing for me to have, you sketch stuff, for me and whatnot. So that is crazy that it came full circle for me to
So
be
the
like,
first time I drew you, you weren't really happy with it.
No,
so you were
no,
like,
no.
we've got to make up for it and have me stomping. Yeah. And in your mind, you've imagined Hal's in the window of that building.
No. It's okay. He'll be. He can be in the top floor, just watching me
On a
from
helicopter.
from the Triple J windows, just watching me. And I will not hit the foundations of Triple J. I'll leave them just as they are, so Hal will survive. It's
Yeah.
fine. It's all love, There you go, full circle. But go. Sorry.
Man, I don't know. There's like so many pieces, and I sort of fluctuate. Like sometimes it's, you know what, you have a honeymoon period where you love a piece, and so at the moment the Street Uni wall I kind of dig. I did cartoon characters of like Randy and Trey and all that. I'm kind of digging it because my style's changed to become a little bit more simplified. It's a bit like Samurai Jack sort of style drawing, but before that I did like a memorial for one of my homies, Nish Cash, that passed away with Rome's. And I was kind of digging that because I did her in sort of like a B-girl sort of style, but he did like a photorealistic version of it.
I was going to say, the two styles.
Yeah. And that was
nice,
a
man.
cool little jam. And he did a killer portrait of me at Bankstown Art Centre.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was so funny.
Bankstown, theatre or whatever.
Theatre.
Yeah, Brian Brown Theatre.
And you and I were just sitting there, we're just like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking up, I'm like, holy shit, it's like a 20-foot picture of your face
Yeah.
up there. Like,
I was blown away. Yeah.
100%. It's
Yeah.
crazy. Next question.
Just real quick, Mystery did also the Manu piece in Street Uni Man drew it, so that was really cool. having you
Yeah,
come
so
through
that was
and-
cool, like
Yeah.
I always like to honor people in art, and although I never met him, I know he meant a lot to the people of Mount Druitt and the hip hop community in general. So, it feels nice to be part of people's healing, I suppose, in a way, and
I
to
think
honor people,
Being obviously a man of faith as you are as well, and understanding that, to that respect, do you know what I mean? To be part of the tactic. Yeah, man, 100%. It's crazy.
Dolph Eth asks, can you ask them, did Eth ask you guys for a Bible and you directed him to the bookshop?
Who said that? Sorry,
Dolph Eth.
I directed him to the bookshop. I don't remember that.
Okay, cool. I just thought to ask it.
If people want one, man, just hit us up. I'll send them one. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's all good. I'll even include the postage, man. Yeah, I don't know. You hear a lot of things. I hear people say, oh, and Mystery Bible bashed me and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, dude, we've had like 2 seconds of conversation and I just asked how your mum was. You know what I mean? So sometimes, like there's a little bit
of...
of...
mum was that a battle?
Yeah, true. So I don't know about that, man. But if I did do that, I'd be surprised.
No, that was your stunt double, me.
Oh, okay, body double,
Pick it.
Yeah.
Next question is from Kendrick. Who is your favorite writer?
Graph writer. There's a graph writer in my crew, TFC Dash from Adelaide. From Perth, but lives in Melbourne, and he'd be one of my faves. Yeah, he's got like this sort of b-boy style, but sort of like quite wispy and that. He's of Chinese Malaysian heritage, but they all sort of got this like sort of like Asian funk to it. Yeah, and he can rock letters and he freestyle graphs and all that sort of stuff as well.
It's come such a long way as well with the caps,
hard. Yeah.
I just saw something the other day that it does like almost like pen line, almost, you know what I mean, in relation to a wall, and then you take it off and it's got a reservoir to put into like a fat cap. Like what the hell?
Yeah. And less gas, like less pressure, so you could taper off lines and lots of stuff. Yeah.
It's an art until you got to teach me one day. Yo.
Victor Lopez asks, when are we getting the new Brethren album?
Well, there won't be another Brethren album
featuring Thick Kid,
but hey, we can get like a Wiz,
welcome Vic,
a Wiz lookalike, because we haven't been in contact with for a while. But there will be some stuff happening, and but yeah, I've just got to work with some other producers.
I'll make that happen. Actually, I'll make that happen as well.
We'll all make it happen.
And big ups to Vic as well. Like him and Trent and a few of the other producers like hooked us up some killer gigs. We did like the Das Effects gig with Vic, and and then Trent hooked up the ones with Premiere, and so I've been honoured to perform with some of the artists that I've idolised, and love. So yeah,
straight up, yeah. Vic's helped a couple of homies out like that. Straight up,
yeah.
Lee, when are we getting the new Thick Kid Lee Monroe album?
We just talked about that before. Soon, it's going to be featuring. It's going to be featuring Mystery.
There you go.
As my stunt double.
I'll be Fig Kid in 10 years' time.
Yeah.
Mystery, when is this is a question from me. When is the KRS-One Mystery MC Trey track coming out?
That's the $1 million question. So Trey talked to... So yeah, for those...
Here we go.
For those that don't know, when KRS-One came out, we sort of spoke to him. So Trey and I were involved in getting him to like different communities. That was part of the stipulation, that he wanted to like connect with locals and all that. And so we hooked up with the guys in Queensland, with my mate Rez and Sydney and a few other places. And so we just said, listen, we've got a sponsor on board. I think they helped us out with something towards it. And me and Trey just sort of like volunteered our time. But we said, listen, would you be able to give us a shout out? And he goes, no. And I was like, okay. He goes,
I moonwalked out of that conversation.
I need to do something better, because it was about health, and he's like into all the health stuff and all that. And he goes, we need to do a track. And I was like, okay. And he goes, we need to do a track. And so I was like, okay. And so we got a beat for him, and me and Trey sent him our lyrics, and then he recorded his vocals and stuff like that. But in it, he mentioned Street Uni. Me and Trey, I had a heart attack when he's like, big ups to my man Mystery. It's like recorded. I've got the stems of it as well, so I can make a dance remix with that.
It's your ringtone, eh?
Yeah.
Shout out to my man Mystery.
Yeah, and then I think Trey spoke to me about releasing it on something that she was going to do, but I don't think that's happened. And then I thought about it as well, but I thought, well, we're talking about doing a Street Uni project, and it'd be people that have been associated. Yeah, so
100%.
Yeah.
Hectic.
And he rips it on it too. Like he does like multis and all that sort of stuff.
I like how you sort of like lean on the fact that sometimes he doesn't rip it, but on this one, he ripped it.
Yeah. He had to lift his game because he was with me and Trey. Yeah.
Yeah, because of Trey.
Is there a time? Is it going to drop soon? Or?
It'll have to be released, because other than me just playing it to people on my computer, which is
other
pretty
than me
sad.
just having it on MP3 on my phone right now.
Yeah.
Just plays it into anyway. Yeah, sorry.
Next question. The questions keep coming in. Izzy asks, "How's your modeling career going?"
Well, I mean,
Does it ever really end?
the thing is, it metamorphosizes. You know what I mean? Like, it used to be sort of like that
It used to be like
young
Leonardo
new-
DiCaprio. Now you're George Clooney.
yeah,
Brad Pitt,
yeah,
one might
yeah,
say.
yeah. It was the nubile young naive lad, but now it's the rugged good looks. And you might notice that there's a bit of the locks going.
I
So
see that.
Fabio dropped the ball.
COVID locks.
Yeah, yeah. Fabio dropped the ball. I don't know if you heard, but he got hit in the face with a bird on a roller coaster once. If you don't believe in God, you got to believe in after that. Like, that's a sense of humor. But now, who else is going to do the cover of Mills and Boone's books?
Who else is going to
I'm
say,
right here.
I can't believe it's
I'm
not
just going to
Barbara?
put it there, Mills and Boone, if you're listening.
Which I'm sure they are.
They tune into Godzilla
Yeah.
all the time.
Bro,
Yeah.
who doesn't? We got a whole 18 people watching
Yeah.
right now.
NJ Grimshaw asks,
NJ.
"Can you ask about my stepdad, G Wiz, an OG?"
Yeah, man. Yeah,
That's his question.
DJ G Wiz. Yeah, I was
Just mentioned before.
talking about him before. Yeah,
100%.
yeah. He was our DJ, and
That's DJ the Saint. He does like hard styles and stuff like that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah, so, I mean, that was pivotal in us hearing UK hip-hop and starting to even think about the whole accent thing. Yeah. And I caught up with them the other day. It's 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
you go.
That's the place to be, man. 7-Eleven.
That's where it all happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say
$1
something.
coffee. Product
Well,
placement.
I go
Hook me up. You owe me.
$3 coffee because
Yeah.
like, I need
I want
that
365
caffeine.
coffees this year, thanks. In one day.
And on that day, you're coming in the Godzilla
I'm
podcast.
peaking. Yeah.
And on that day, you out-rap KRS-One. All right, yeah, sweet. He killed it, though, one time. One time only. Anyway, go. Next.
Darren Samuela asks, "Do you think the Bulldogs have any chance of avoiding the wooden spoon?"
I'm surprised you haven't got doggy stuff on.
I know. With
probably
a
under here, right?
with a it's in my heart, which is broken. There is no chance that we are going to rise to the occasion. I'm sad to say, but next year, man, next year. I'm saying that every year
Next
at the moment.
year.
Yeah.
Said Parramatta Eels. No joke.
Yeah, if we ever get a good coach. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. That was a tough one. I was gonna wear my doggies the 3/4 sleeve.
Oh, nice.
I put on a
nice.
bit of weight, so I couldn't wear it today.
From Dennis, "How did you get started running the Tuesday breaking at MYRC with Rungster Boogie?"
Yeah, so the breaking group at MYRC started out in a similar way to the one at Livo. Actually, no, sorry. The B-Boy All-Stars guys were running a workshop at Glebe Youth Centre. And that was going for a couple of weeks. And so there was a big period from the late 80s where there wasn't many people breaking at all. And then the Run DMC Jason Nevins video came out that had breaking in it, had B-Boy Cujo and Animation and all those guys in it. And then there were people that were interested in it that hadn't been previously. The twins were doing the stuff at Glebe, and then that sort of petered out, and we were like, well, we still need somewhere to train. And so me and Jester and a few of the guys, we were like, can we use this space at Marrickville? And then, that went for many, many years. And then eventually it sort of slowed down, and then we sort of reignited it at Liverpool. Yeah.
Craziness.
So last one from Izzy. He just wants to let you know that Kid Rock is looking for a stunt double.
I knew some disparaging comment was going to come from Izzy. You know what?
Says Izzy,
That's the last one.
You know what? A friend of mine, Supercam from Queensland, shout out to Supercam, he sent me a photo many years ago of Kid Rock walking with Pamela Anderson in the airport, and I had to double take that it wasn't me. I was like, damn, he friggin' looks like me, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he looks like you, not the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Ask KRS-One.
Yeah, so the rumours of me and Pamela Anderson, went gangbusters for a while. You know what I mean? But I was like, listen, all right, I was on an episode of Baywatch, but we won't talk about that. You know what I mean? I was the drowned person, that David Hasselhoff gave mouth to mouth to. I don't want to talk about it. Sorry, I'm seeing a counsellor about it.
Oh man, yeah, you wouldn't stop with that one. So that was it. Any more questions? Okay.
Or forever hold your peace.
Man, couple of things.
Good.
100%.
Yeah,
You know, you wear that-
we're living in denial.
it's
We're
a
living in
badge-
denial.
The badge
Yeah.
on your heart, you unfortunately wear. You know, you
Yeah.
remember Belmore Oval and the VB,
Yeah.
that hill on the south side. You know, with the VB, the cardboard from the.
Yeah.
We used
Well,
to go down the hills on them.
you know what? It's helping me relate to the South supporters for many years. My family, my wife's family, they're all South supporters, and what was it? 43 years they didn't win a premiership. I'm bracing for the next 40 to go. So yeah, if I'm around still,
No, it won't be that long, but man.
bring back Hasm.
Couple of things. First of all, thank you so much, man. It's been
Thank
an
you.
absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
And mad history in that. So appreciate it. Looking forward to anything new coming out. I'm sure we've got stuff in the works as well.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
we're
yeah.
working on. Like I said, dope as fuck to be sober. Big thanks to 4E for connecting with us on this one. It's been really good. Doing some great things. Shout out to Viv. Obviously, Open Source, Molotov, Godzilla podcast. Like the page, and we out.